one's ideas for one's homily when one has to preach a lot. Should have preparation. I'm still going to move my head about as if you're all here. Should have preparation, yet you should also be fluid, prepared to move at a moment of inspiration. And I will say that on listening and reading along with the Paschal sequence, I was struck by a particular line, and I thought, that's how I'm going to start. I'm going to go the rest of the way, more or less as I planned, but that's how I'm going to start my homily. A lamb, sheep, well, let's put it in the English. Let's say what it meant. One of the sheep has redeemed the whole flock. That's what the line means. This is remarkable. I just want to dwell on this for a moment. It's one thing to be a member of the flock, a certain species, if you will, which has its own power of living life and self-motivation, but at the same time really needs a lot of help from a shepherd, one who can take it to the right places to eat. We sheep, if left to ourselves, we'd stay in the green grass, and when we'd finished morally or intellectually. But I'm going to set about, if you will, an evolution in you. I'm going to do what the word evolution really means, which is have something drawn out and unfolded from a potential, yet a potential that you never could have realized on your own. A lamb, one of the flock, has redeemed the entire flock of sheep. So that the sheep, when they look at their shepherd, see not only the great divinity which cares and loves for them, they also see one of their own. One of their own. This corresponds to a profound desire in us to be our own God. Jesus himself even said this in response to the Pharisees. They listened to what Jesus was saying. They knew what he was implying, that he had equality with divinity. They accused him of this directly. They said, this man makes himself equal to God. And Jesus said, is it not written in the scriptures, you are gods? That we have the godlike in us. And even in our fallen state, man has never, as a matter of fact, you might say, it was really the essence of the first sin. To merely by our own power, on our own will, without the cooperation of the one who made us, as if over against him, to grasp for divinity, to reach for the fruit of divine power. And this begins the long and terrible course of human history in which man futilely yet sees the divinity in himself and says, like the first sinner said, I will ascend to the mountain of the Lord. I will be like the Most High. It's said, it's a common understanding in ancient Christianity that the real issue of the fall of the first sinner, the first great angel, Lucifer, remember, which is a beautiful name, he's the bearer of light, is that he alone, or he was the first to see the plan that God had in making man, in making us, that it was our destiny to be raised above even his own unspeakably exalted station. And rather than rejoice in this beautiful act of God that he was given knowledge of, he hated God for it and was jealous of his own prerogative. And there begins the long trail of misery that he brings upon this earth. We've never ceased to try to grasp for Godhead by our own power, and to whatever heights that we may achieve, there's always an ugly, precipitous fall, as if we keep recycling the evil of the fall of our first parents in the garden. Yet the dream of ascending to Godhead, ascending to divinity, to escaping the ugliness and the contingency and the suffering and the oftentimes apparent futility of this life never leaves us. Like the poet said, hope springs eternal. We always imagine that just around the next corner it's possible that heaven awaits us. The message of the gospel is not merely that God seeks to humble us from that illicit desire. Remember even the disciples whose mother came and asked, and they asked themselves, "Let us sit on your right and on your left." And Jesus didn't rebuke them for wanting this. He just said, make sure you know what you ask for. But he says, yes, this desire to ascend up into the very life of God, your Creator, it's proper for you. It's placed in you. It's your destiny. It's what I've always had for you. The news of the gospel, then, is that when we look into the eyes of our shepherd, we see not only the God that is infinitely above us, but the one who has a quality we otherwise could never have suspected. That his love is such that it's not jealous of its own prerogative and glory, but wants to share itself and its glory with us, so much so that it gives its divinity to us, and thereby raises us up unto this level. When we look into the eyes of our shepherd, we also see one of our own. Now, this is a source of great joy. It's the source of our hope. But it's also a profound responsibility. And so we who live in the baptism, not only of the Passion of the Lord, but of Easter, have always, as we do on the vigil and as we will shortly, to renew the promises of our baptism, which always remind us that the way to the life of God is the path also of the death of God. And so we live then in this tension, and as we celebrate this moment of great hope and of great joy on Easter Sunday, let us remember then that we are committing ourselves to living not the fruitless, futile death of a world without God, but rather the death of God that brings life. This is a real death, by the way. It is a real self-emptying. It is painful for us. But it's possible for us to lay ourselves in front of this pain and in front of this death and take it upon ourselves, because our God has done this for us and with us, and then he will do it in us. I have a little saying in our family. I think of my mother's voice saying this, but I know other family members say it. When one bad thing keeps coming to one, and one gives out a sigh and says, if it ain't one thing, it's another. If it isn't one difficult trial, it's another. And here we are in the middle of a time in which none of us have ever experienced before. There was a lady in the paper the other day but she's about 107 years old, so that means she was a little toddler, pre-kindergarten, 4 or 5 years old, during the time of the Spanish flu, maybe even younger. And it's not that she remembers and can give us skills for what it means to go through a situation like this, But as a survivor, she's capable of saying, I've been through that. I live to tell about it. I'm living proof that it's possible to go on and be prosperous and happy and joyful and live a good human life, even after such a tragedy befalls us. And so we print a story like this because in times like this we need such signs of hope. Remember, this is the joy of Easter. It's the great story on the front page. Because one of us has gone down to ultimate death, even the death of futility, and suffered all the suffering and the evil and all of the unspeakable things that human beings do to one another and to themselves as a result of their alienation from God. Because one of us has gone down to pay the final price of that alienation and has lived to tell about it. We too have hope that it's possible for us. And this hope isn't merely a kind of a Pollyannish sort of optimistic wishing. Well, it happened to one guy. Who knows? Maybe it could happen to me too. No. For us who are baptized, for us who have received the gospel, this hope is certain. We have already been inaugurated into it. And so as we gather physically here, wherever you may be, on this Easter Sunday at this liturgy, we're entering into the hope that we have been given and that's been guaranteed to us by Christ. And this means as we continue to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, even when fear and hopelessness is threatened, we have one sitting beside us who isn't just telling us, hey, don't worry, be happy, I survived this. Maybe you can too, I don't know, take a positive attitude. This isn't the kind of friend we need in our suffering. The friend we need in our suffering is the one who will both suffer with us and maintain the strength of what he knows, that this suffering and this evil does not have the last word. And he himself is a testimony to it. And then by means of that, he communicates that strength and that power to us. So that we, just like we said, when we look into the eyes of our shepherd and we see not only God but one of us, we then turn around as members of the flock, as those who have been saved, and go about as representations of the redemption that we've been given. We go about, this was what we go about as little Christs. We didn't call ourselves that in the beginning. It's what the naysayers referred to, the early followers of the way. Christiani, little Jesuses. They think they're like him. They think that they can suffer the ultimate price of sin and still live to tell about it and come back from the dead and be witnesses and do miracles and preach hope in the world. That's what they think, said the pagans. On this day, above all days, we are reminded of ourselves. It's our calling, our responsibility, and our joy to be just like those first Christians who, when those outside pointed at them, said, they think they've conquered death. We think that. We believe that. Let's live like it.